Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk About House. I'm Todd.
I'm Lana.
Okay, today we're going to talk about whether a recession would be good for the housing market or bad for the housing market. There's mixed opinions on this. What's interesting is even if you read articles that there's a lot of misperceptions that people have about this.
Right.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 3 articles that came out literally this week that talked about the odds of a recession, and then what the Fed would be doing as a response to a recession. Okay, and then we'll talk about those trade-offs between what things happen in a recession, what even is a recession, what does it mean? Because I think there's this people have a they don't have any idea like what a recession actually is. They don't really understand what a recession is. We've actually had 2 of them in the last 4 years.
Right.
We've had 2 of them since 2020. And there's a good probability the second one you didn't even know about. But we were technically in a recession, okay?
Okay, so recessions can be like those earthquakes that you slept through. So
yes.
that can happen.
I think that's a good analogy. When you hear earthquake, you foresee, like in a movie, buildings falling down, the cracks and everyone falling into it. And usually what happens is the ground shakes a little, some stuff in your cabinet falls over, you go, oh, that was it? Maybe some dust comes off your light fixture, right? Because you haven't cleaned it. And then you're like, oh, that was it? And then electricity stays on, everything's kind of normal. And then everyone makes a big deal about it, goes on X or on Facebook, social media. Oh, I just had a felt an earthquake, right?
Right.
That's literally, okay, here we go. All right, so these are the headlines from the articles. Now, they're all different predictions, okay? The first, the Fed could slash rates below 3% to maintain a notoriously difficult soft landing. JP Morgan expert says, so an expert at JP Morgan says to maintain a soft landing, the Fed is going to drop rates.
Right.
And that's to keep, because the rates are probably too high for what we normally need for a normal, healthy economy, borrowing rates, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, here's another headline. Okay, now remember, the key of this was the Fed slashing rates below 3%. Okay, below 3%, the current rates for Fed are above 5. They're 5.25, 5.5, I think, is the federal funds rate.
Right, and they haven't touched them since July.
So if we get below 3, they're basically dropping them 3%. What happens if we knock 3% off the going mortgage rate right now?
We end up at 3% mortgages.
We end up at like just under 4% mortgages. If we get the mortgages below 4, what does that do for housing?
Well, it's going to make it even more exciting, right?
Okay.
Because even more people are going to want to take advantage of the low rates. But what the other thing that's going to do is it's going to be more sellers to the market, because now it's going to be this thing that's going to hopefully feed itself, where sellers are saying, hey, interest rates are much more reasonable. I can go out there and buy something and, kind of trade and put my house on the market too. So that would be an interesting thing, because that's one of the things that's happening right now is sellers want to go out and buy. They want to sell their homes, but there's nothing that they want out there to buy. So they're not putting their home on the market because they don't want to be homeless. So they're waiting until the right house comes along for them before they'll put their house on the market, which of course means that the house that would be perfect for them isn't coming on the market for the same reason why their house isn't going on the market.
Yeah, it's classic game theory. It's prisoner's dilemma. So homeowners call it, we're going to coin a term here again, just like we coined the term crash bros. Actually used the term for a housing hack years ago in buying a fourplex. And I think someone saw that video and copied it. Did that video probably in 2009. So 25 or 15 years ago. Okay, here's the next article. The Fed will slash rate 6 times this year as recession spreads across the U.S. and the job market deteriorates. Market veteran says 6 times is probably going to be 3% off the current 5.5. So now we're talking 2.5% rates, which puts the mortgage rates down probably into the 3s again.
Right.
So we're talking 3% rates again with that scenario.
Not that I'm an economist or an expert, but I think 6 times in 2024 for the Fed to cut rates is not reasonable.
Yeah. Here's another one. This is Fitch. No U.S. recession predicting 2024. Despite warning signs, this is actually the worst news for the housing market of all of these. Okay, so let's go through some of the details of these articles. This is in no particular order. These are random quotes. Okay, here's the first one. The Fed is bound to slash interest rates 6 times in 2024, MetLife's Drew Matus predicted. Those cuts will come as a recession spreads across the U.S. The market vet told CNBC in a recent interview. The job market could quickly deteriorate, even though employment numbers looked strong in December. It makes no sense. Like, hey, employment numbers look good. Well, employment numbers have been good for 2 years straight. So every month you could have said, well, if you have a good month, then it's going to deteriorate because it gets worse. So it's the trend. Do you think some of this is just people that are always super negative? Like, there's a lot of people that are always like, the worst thing is getting ready to happen. And it's been getting ready to happen since Y2K. And a lot of the kids out there don't know what Y2K is, but I remember Y2K was literally the electricity was going to go off. The banking system was like nothing would work.
Well, the preppers had a good time with Y2K.
Preppers loved it.
Yes. So, here's the thing. Unemployment has been basically steady at 4% for the last couple of years, which is really good. Inflation actually ticked up in December. So with inflation ticking up in December, the annual rate for 2023, I think ended up being around 3.4%. So with that in mind, I don't see the Fed touching interest rates, certainly not in the near future. And then that would push off that whole 6 times in 2024. It would kick the can down the road. And then that means that even if they thought the Fed would touch the rates about every 2 months or every other month, now they're not going to, because they had a spike in inflation in December. Unemployment held steady, or actually it's pretty good. So I don't see them touching rates in February. So like I said, I've always said this, that it's possible that they'll touch rates in March. I would prefer that they wait until the second quarter, but the soonest I can see the Fed touching rates is March.
Okay, here's another quote. I tip my hat to the Fed. They've engineered a soft landing. You're pretty much bang on the 2% inflation target. You've got unemployment at 4% or below for 24 consecutive months. They've met their dual mandate of full employment and price stability. Michelle, who is the head of global fixed income, said, I just think soft landings are notoriously difficult to maintain, and their best hope of ensuring that we stay in a soft landing is they gradually start bringing down the Fed funds rate. Otherwise, real rates will be too powerful of a headwind. There's a super lag period between rates and it showing in the economy.
Right.
Why is that?
It's a big economy. It takes a while to percolate all the way through. It takes a long time between making choices to borrow money, making choices to purchase goods and services, actually going through with those purchases. I mean, it just takes a long time. It's not something you can do with the snap of a finger, which is why the Fed got basically pummeled when they were slow to react to inflation, when inflation started to tick up, and they said it was transitory and they didn't do anything about it. So I don't think that they're going to knee jerk and all of a sudden go, oh, things are rosy for a couple of months, let's go ahead and cut rates. I think that they're going to wait it out. I think they're going to have a lot of different things to consider, and I think that they're going to cut rates very cautiously, very slowly, and certainly not 6 times in 12 months. I think that's out of line.
Okay, let's talk about the thing that everyone always brings up. They always say, but Todd, in a recession, there'll be mass foreclosures because most people will lose their jobs. Like, most people will be out of work and they'll have to sell. They'll be foreclosed almost immediately. Like, it'll happen that fast. And then the homes will flood the market.
So two things. One, when lots of people were out of work during the pandemic, homes didn't get foreclosed on. And two, when lots of homes were getting foreclosed during the housing crisis, we didn't have mass unemployment. So okay, just pointing that out.
Let's talk about that. 17% unemployment in 2020. Home prices went up.
Right.
During the time of the recession, the lockdown recession that we had, where the economy basically shut down, goods and services weren't being produced, home prices went up. Mm-hmm. Home prices went up with 17% unemployment. The only thing we had was a temporary people being late on their mortgage, that after 2 years, 97% of the people that were late were no longer late on their mortgage. 97% were cured, completely cured, meaning they sold the house, they renegotiated something with the bank, or they just made up the payments.
Right.
They just like, oh, we can make back up the payments. Here's the other thing too. Unemployment's really, it's like 3.7%. Let's say worst case scenario, 7%.
That would be substantial.
Okay, that would be a huge, that would be the biggest recession we've seen since the 80s.
Right.
Okay, here we go. We have 7% unemployment. So we have the existing 3.7% of people. So we have another 3% of people that don't have jobs. So we're cutting 3% of the people out of the home buying pool. So instead of 100 people buying, you have 97, right? Now, so over here on one side of the equation, you've got 97 buyers and 3 who can't buy, right? Now, what do you think the Fed's going to do to interest rates if we get down to, no kidding, like 7% unemployment?
So first of all, 7% unemployment doesn't happen overnight. There would be something that would precipitate that. I mean, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum.
What would Fed do? Forget all that. What would Fed do with rates? We're in fantasy land here. Would they go to 0 again?
No, they wouldn't go to 0.
1?
No, I mean, I think that they would come down slowly. I mean, this is a big...
No, we're not talking about what they would actually do. We're talking about the trade-off levers.
Okay.
High unemployment. Look, the Fed funds rate was 0 in 2000 and end of 2021 because they thought we were going to have a recession.
Right.
Just a recession. They said, "Oh, look, we're starting to get some unemployment. The economy's slowing."
Okay, so your premise is that the federal funds rate would go to nothing or next to nothing, and then interest rates for homes would follow to be really low, and then you have lots of housing activity because interest rates are low.
Okay, so I'm going to put it this way. You're not going to answer the question. I'm just going to give you a scenario. Which is better for the housing market? What we have now, where interest rates are high and we have 3.7 unemployment, or 7% unemployment, where 93% of the people can buy, but interest rates are 3% again. Which of those is a bigger boon for the real estate market?
Low interest rates.
Right, because the 3% that can't buy, first of all, statistically, a third of those are renters anyway, so they're renting. Okay, here's the other thing people fail to sort of think about. Okay, let's say, Juana, that you're a renter and you're thinking of buying, and you lose your job. Well, how do you pay your rent? Like, do you get evicted then? Like, oh, they can't afford to buy it. They don't make any money. Well, how can they afford to pay their rent?
Right. Well, I mean, so, when that happens, people go dip into savings, they borrow money, however they make things work. Yeah.
Here's the second scenario. You have a house. Your mortgage payment is $1,500. You could rent the same house for $2,200. You lose your job and you say, we can't afford this really high $1,500 a month house payment every month. We have to sell the house so we can go pay $2,200 a month because that's more affordable since I just lost my job. So
look, if you can't pay your rent, you're going to get evicted. If you can't pay your mortgage, foreclosure is going to take years. You got time to get this sorted out. Okay. Here's the next quote from the article. With the benchmark rate unchanged at 5.25 to 5.5% since July, a 250 basis point, I hate that, it's 2.5%. Okay, slash would bring it down to a 2.75 to 3% range. Now remember, there's this premium for mortgages. So that's going to put with no risk, meaning if all the risk taken out, it's 1 to it's going to be the 10-year is going to be 1 to 1.5% over that. So you're still going to have 3.75 to maybe 4.5% rates. They're not going to be 0, right? They're going to still be, but that's still pretty low historically. The idea is that if we get back to this neutral rate of 2.5%, we're back to 4% mortgage rates for home loans, right? Which is pretty damn, like all the people that got the 6-7% ones are all going to refi, right? Okay. UBS has also said the Fed could bring interest rates below the 3% threshold, though it expects a mild recession mid-2024 as consumers slowly lose momentum. We've heard that consumers are going to run out of steam, lose momentum. We've heard all kinds of predictions about how consumers will somehow be the cause of the recession. And bless their hearts, consumers have kept on going.
Do you remember the we did a video on this, August 2023 article came out. 100% chance of recession in the next 12 months. So I think in September, October, we did a video where we joked about this. This is like the crash bros for the recession people. There's 100% chance. It's 100%. Juana, what does 100% mean?
It means there's certainty, and the only certainty I know is death and taxes.
If you watch a football game and the score is like, and they're ahead by 4 touchdowns starting the fourth quarter, it's never 100% chance. It'll say 99.9%. It never says 100% chance. Okay, here's another quote. The New York Fed, meanwhile, has priced in a 63% chance the economy could slip into recession by the end of the year. When I hear the word recession, all it means to me is that we produced less goods and services than we produced the previous whatever year, quarter. Usually they measure by quarter. So if you produce 0.1% less output, you're technically in a recession, right?
Right.
Do you lose half the jobs? Could half the people produce 99.9% of what the other half of the people produced?
Sure. And look, I mean, just because we produce less than in the previous quarter doesn't tell the whole story. Sometimes there's a legitimate reason. So, for example, maybe there's supply chain problems, and that might be why the output was less. And we've had that periodically where when the chip manufacturers weren't able to put out enough chips, then the car assembly lines were stopped because they couldn't proceed with finishing off cars. So it just depends on the reason for that downward trend in the output. It's not just the number, but you need to understand the context.
Yeah. Here's a quote. The consumer backbone of the economy, though, showing signs of fatigue, is still robust. Household net worth remains near record highs after surging 37% from 2019 to 2022, according to Federal Reserve data, buoyed by high home values and a stock market that continues to perform well. Mm-hmm. Right? How much do you think people who are long-term renters, I think people who have owned a home for a bunch of years don't ever want to rent again. Do you think that?
I do. I think that people who are homeowners have a hard time wanting to be tenants again. And you see that because, particularly as they get older, they could go rent a vacation rental, but they end up buying a second home and using that to vacation rather than just renting a place for their family to go visit. So you do see a lot of that. Now, obviously, there's an affordability component to that as well. But you do see people who retire, who then move to somewhere else, and they're usually inclined to buy versus rent.
Yeah. Here's another quote. The labor market, though not without its challenges, sports a low unemployment rate of just 3.7%. Wages are growing at about 5% as of November 2023, with much of this circulating back in the economy. Furthermore, wages are rising in real terms, suggesting their households can sustain, if not increase, their consumption levels. This is why people are still buying houses. This is why people are buying houses with a $2,400 a month mortgage payment that was $1,500 3 years ago.
Right. And this also speaks to the inflation numbers that came out for December, that they are up.
Another thing, 5 of the last 7 recessions, indexed year over year, home prices went up.
Yep. All right, so that was fun.
That was fun.
Did you have fun? Was it interesting?
So what's your gut feeling, Juana? I personally think a nice little recession or something that would scare the Federal Reserve into tanking interest rates would be absolutely fantastic.
You have said that repeatedly, and we all know that. I happen to just kind of like something chill. I like a smooth sailing kind of economy.
You like your 2% growth every year, right?
I do. I like it boring. I like it predictable. Okay? I don't think I'm the only one out there. Do you like the economy being exciting, or do you like the economy being predictable? Leave us your real estate related comments. Remember to like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share the video, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.
Bye.